Evening, everyone. We're going to call this meeting to order at 4 p.m. Adoption of the agenda.
The West Elgin Council hereby adopts the regular council agenda for September 26, 2024 as presented.
The mover, please. Councillor Statham, seconded. Deputy Mayor Tellier, all in favour? It's carried. Disclosure of any pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we go straight to delegations. Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority, draft preliminary watershed-based resources management. Welcome, Valerie, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. My name is Mark Peacock. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer of the Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority. What I want to do this afternoon is go through our watershed-based resource management strategy. It's a document as required by the province, one of 6 that the province has required us to do in the last year. We will be completing a number of other initiatives, and those initiatives are also shown within this document. So it'll give you an idea of the breadth of work that we're doing. This is our strategic plan, both for resource management, from a resource management perspective and from a staffing perspective. So both for organizational strategic planning and resource management work. So next slide. So this plan, it is strategic, so it's on the high level, but we want to have actionable items in it, and we don't want it set up on a shelf. It has to be based on the legislative requirements we have as municipalities are going through many changes by the provincial government, so our conservation authorities. So our act has changed a number of times in the last few years. We have had many regulations put onto us. Much of this plan is getting us to a point of reevaluating our programs, making sure that they're in line with new legislation, but also being more efficient. And I'm just going to take a second to talk about effective programming. We think that effective programming is a result of balancing 4 things. So it's a stool with 4 legs, and we want to balance those legs on the stool. The stool consists of these 4 legs. We want a quality program. We want an efficient or cost-effective program. We want to deal with risk, and we want to have impact for our community. All 4 of those things must be in place. We don't want to have quality that we can't afford. We don't want to have a very affordable program that doesn't create impact for our community. So as I go through these different programs, you can be assured that that is the metrics we use to measure whether we have an effective program as we move forward. Next slide, please. So as I said before, we're bringing together the watershed science and the strategic planning for the organization. Next slide. I'm going to go through these relatively quickly. You've got a lot of work this afternoon. So part of this is there's a whole bunch of mandatory things. The province has required through the Ontario Regulation 686/21, our mandatory services program. We have been told there's things we must do. And these are the list of the things: natural hazards, our conservation area land, drinking water source protection, and a number of monitoring programs. So that must be in it. Next slide. So what about the rest, the stuff we do? If we sign an agreement with our municipalities, we're allowed to do those. Every one of the 10 municipalities of our watershed, including this municipality, has signed that agreement. So this plan includes everything that we do, and it follows what we said we would do in our memorandum of understanding with your municipality. Next slide. So strategic planning, what do we have it? We have our foundational statements, the things that really guide us in how we do the work. And then we have input from the community, from municipalities, from our board. And then we respond to that. And I'll show you, I'm not going to go through everything by any stretch. I want to give you enough tools so that if you want to crack open this document, you can work your way through it. And then finally, we have to talk about how we do what our community and what our municipalities, and our municipalities are one of our key stakeholders. You fund us, we make sure that we listen to what you have to say. Next slide, our vision. This is important, the word balanced, because we feel that the environment needs to be balanced with our community's needs, with the economic needs, with character of our communities. We are here for the long run. We can't move. We're watershed based. We're here. And we've got to fit into our communities in such a way that we support them in their growth and in their viability. Next slide. Mission statement. We're going to do it before we ask anybody else to do it. So we will move forward in a legitimate way. Next slide. These are our core values. One of the really important one is respect. We work closely with our municipalities, and we work closely with our First Nations. And we do a lot of work where respect is paramount. We're a little old-fashioned that way. We do dress up well when we go places. We do treat a farmer or a landowner as if they are a respected member of our community when we go out and talk to them, and I'm sure your staff do too. But in some ways, that's a bit of an old-fashioned idea, but we're going to remain old-fashioned. So next slide. In what we do, we've broken those down, everything we do into 5 buckets or areas of focus. And 3 of them are areas of resource management focus. 3 of them are around the organization. So in the resource management, we have healthy and climate resistant watersheds, supporting sustainable growth, and connecting people with nature. And I'll show you how that all fits together. And then finally, we want to be your partner of choice, and we want to develop organizational excellence in how we conduct business. Next slide. This slide shows you how our areas all fit into these buckets. So when we're talking about healthy and climate resistant watersheds, we're talking about work in stewardship, species at risk, the planning we do, all the agricultural programs that we undertake. And we also do urban stewardship and monitoring. Under the supporting sustainable growth, that's a lot of that is about keeping people safe, protecting them from natural hazards. So that's our regulations program, the support we give to planning, all those types of things that we do. We do also run flood control structures. We deal with droughts, all those elements of protecting people. Connecting people to nature, that's our Scanado Village, our Sam Wilson Learning Center, all those facilities we have out there where people come and experience nature. Our communication and outreach, and our campgrounds as well. Next slide. So there's lots of input into this, and we do have a watershed plan called the Shared Waters Approach. We have done that with the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority. It is the only watershed plan that has endorsement of First Nations. So there's a full First Nations, 8 First Nations were engaged in developing our watershed plan. And it really looks both at the science, but also at the traditional knowledge that those communities bring to this area, and it respects that. So what are we going to do? First thing we do, next slide, is we develop specific objectives. I'm not going to go through these. You can read them. There's 17 of them, and they are specific to those bucket areas, different subsections of those bucket areas. And they were generally developed from input from the community. So they guide us in that. And where did the input come from? Next slide. In the plan, you'll see input all the way through it and how we responded to it. So the one side is we think there should be a climate change. You guys need to deal with that. Now, the reality is we deal with it all the time. We work with all our municipalities in developing climate change plans, but we don't have one ourselves. So that was input from someone, and then we work our way through all that input. That becomes one of the fundamental pieces of developing our strategic plan for the next 5 years. Next slide. Now we have to figure out how to get there. And how we get there is describe 2 things: how our existing programs answer what people want, and how we need to have new programs to answer what people want. Many of the new programs are based on what we are required to do anyways by legislature, and many of them are also in us figuring out how we can make existing programs more effective so we can expand them to do the same, to do what the province and what our municipalities and other people want us to do, but not significantly increase the costs of doing that. And here's where I put on my glasses because the lettering gets small. So Under the first bucket, healthy and climate change, these climate resilient watersheds, these are the existing programs we have. We have rural and urban stewardship programs. We have Chatham-Kent Lambton Children's Water Festival, which occurs next week. We also support the Middlesex Elgin London one. We have partner groups that we support in stewardship, our species at risk program, our monitoring networks, the major phosphorus reduction program that we're moving into. We will be getting about $13 million from the federal government over the next 3 and a bit years. And it was just announced in Windsor last Friday, the week before Friday, last Friday. And it is an important program. And then we have non-active conservation areas. So new programs, next slide. Under this category, we're going to develop a climate action plan. We need to do that. We are working with a number of partners across the watershed in that already. We are going to integrate our watershed monitoring. We do a lot of monitoring. We have 22 stations that automatically sample water during storm events throughout this watershed. But we are getting more and more questions about climate change and other things like that. So we need to develop a more comprehensive program that pulls all our monitoring together and make sure that we're answering the questions that we need to going forward. And, you know, a lot of our monitoring is like edge of field sampling for phosphorus reduction, those types of things. And we've got to continually evaluate the best places to monitor and the information we're gathering. We were looking, and this came from one of our board members, we're looking at if there is a municipality that wishes to move forward with an invasive species control program, and we've done this before with Phragmites with the City of London, we would be quite willing to work on those types of program. And the phosphorus management program is going to be a big portion of our work over the next 4 years. Next slide. Supporting sustainable growth. One of the things that we've had a customer service initiative that's about 1.5 years old, where we track, and every 2 months you get a statement from in our board report that says how we're doing in providing customer service. So how many days to respond to every type of permit or planning application, whatever we have. That is out there. There is under our new regulations, there is a time frame. Our time frame is actually significantly tighter than what the province is required of us, and we report on both those, what the province requires and what our local customer service initiative requires. We have to continually update our flood contingency plan and our low water response. That's our drought plan. The River and Creek Safety Program, that's where we go into schools. That's funded through local insurance companies, where we go into schools and provide that. The flood forecasting and warning program, we do a lot of work with managing hazards along the lakes. So we're with management plans along the lakes. And we basically, in the end, we try not to create more problems for people. So under new programs, under that, we are going to develop a floodplain mapping and risk assessment strategy. The province is requiring us to review all our mapping every year now. That's something we never did. We know we are deficient. We are looking at moving forward with new mapping in the Thames River. We're actually surveying about 140 kilometers of that river. We're doing bathymetry in that right now. We will be looking forward to looking at moving forward with Talbot Creek mapping. There's a number of initiatives, but we need to move forward with that because of requirements under the new regulations. Integrated watershed monitoring, once again, that's important stuff. Ice management plan, that's another thing that the province is required. We have ice management plans. We have to rewrite them in the formats that the province now requires. We need the shared waters approach, which is our watershed plan. Many of the things that we need to do is described in that watershed plan, and we need to continue to develop implementation planning around that. The flood control structures operational plan, that is not another requirement of the province that we have to do. We do have individual plans for each one of it, but it all has to come into a different format. So that has to be done by the end of the year. And then the climate plan. We're going to move forward with the climate action plan. Next slide is Area 3, which is connecting people to nature. That piece of things. What do we do? A lot of way we connect people to nature. We do about 250 projects with people a year. And it could be building a wetland, could be planting trees, could be alternative farming methods, could be anything like that. We think that's probably the best way of connecting people to nature, because if they have a skin in the game, they're going to really have support for the things that we do. We work with a lot of municipalities around natural heritage strategies and doing that work. We have outreach and education programs, and we have conservation areas where people come and experience. New things that we are going to be doing. The conservation land strategy is another requirement of the province, so we are moving forward with that. It's not only a strategy, but a database we have to create for the province. The Scanado Village, you're probably aware of that facility that we have. We have just finished building the Indigenous Learning Center extension on that, and therefore we need to do some more strategic planning with the community on how we use that new facility. C.M. Wilson Learning Center is another new facility that we're working with the municipality of Chatham-Kent in the development. It's the old Chatham-Kent Safety Village, but it's been expanded to have Indigenous and environmental learning in it. And we need a strategic plan. And finally, if it looks like actually the province is going to fund a natural heritage study for us for the entire watershed. Partner of choice is the next one. And there's only this in one more bucket to talk about. So we have a customer service program. We think that's important. We do stewardship awards to the community in our annual meeting. We probably will be expanding that because we will be putting another $3 million a year into the community to do stewardship work. So we will probably be expanding that. And we need to continue financial reporting. Every 2 months, we do a full accounting to our municipalities of where we are financially. You'll see that in our board package, and that we feel is an important element of being a partner of choice. If you know how we spend your money, you hopefully value us as a partner. Next slide. So one of the things we have done Indigenous training, we need to continue to do that, and we need to do it in a more formal way. And we also have to update our communications and outreach strategy so that people know what we're doing. Next slide. Organizational excellence. Our last strategic plan was much to do with how our organization ran. And so there, a number of these initiatives came out of our last 5-year initiative, things like our HR committee. So we have a committee of staff that deals with all HR issues. It's an in-camera type of situation, but we bring staff into the decisions around HR. We have monthly staff meetings. They're usually potlucks, and it's a good dinner. I'll tell you that. But it's building. We have a problem in that we have people we go all the way from London to the shore of Lake St. Clair, and we have a number of staff areas. So it's really important that we bring everybody together. I've had people that 2 months later didn't know somebody from another office. Like those are the issues that we have, and we've been working to deal with that. And we need to, and that's all about fostering this team organizational strength. And we're improving communications. We're doing one of the things that we have been working on for some time is an asset management plan. And it's difficult. We never in the past, I've only been here about 6 years. At the end of the year, if there's money left over, we deal with assets. That's not a proper way of dealing with assets, but it was a financial reality. So we're now doing it way more proactively in developing that planning. And that actually is required by legislation for us by the end of this year. So the other thing, next slide. This is the last slide. We are going to do a salary review. One of the challenges is we lose staff. Val's with us, has been with us forever, and thank goodness. But 1 year we lost 1/3 of our staff. And it's because we're doing a great job at training staff for municipalities and other conservation authorities. We need to get our salaries to the point of being competitive so we can keep staff. So that is something the board has approved for next year. We need our asset management plan, and we need to update hiring procedures. So that is a really quick look at a relatively large document that is available, but I'm hoping I gave you the tools to look through it. If you have any questions at all, I'd be willing to ask them, and I'd be willing to meet with staff if staff wish to go over it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's all very interesting. You know, you talked about climate change, which is obviously we all think about climate change, but you know, farming change also. You know, when I'm looking towards, say, Chatham, and I see how many, could you tell us how many acres of greenhouse glass you've got? Which obviously, on the 2-day event, and their ponds, storage ponds are filled up, it makes a big difference. The runoff goes straight into the Thames, correct?
Yes, and we have watersheds in Leamington that will be, when built out, 75% greenhouse. And they're building greenhouses at the tune of 200 to 300 acres a year.
I mean, until you hear those numbers, it's hard to believe.
Yeah.
And I remember I talked to you about it before, you know, and I just couldn't believe that acreage in glass. And when you combine the lot, it's a lot, isn't it?
It is a lot. It is, and it changes the hydrology of watersheds. We've been working with Leamington on one creek specifically to figure out how we hold the water back, because as these greenhouses, they're creating impervious surfaces that are massive. So we're doing a lot of work to try to figure out how to protect the existing people in those communities because of the amount of greenhouse development. And that's not even thinking about how the nutrients from the greenhouses get into the watershed. At this point, we're dealing, well, and we are dealing with that point, but the first thing is to protect people from getting flooded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's a massive problem.
Mm-hmm.
Council, any questions, please? Ryan, Councillor Ryan.
Thank you very much through the chair. Mark, I wanted to thank you. I think you guys do a phenomenal job. I personally, I'm an avid outdoorsman and I appreciate the stewardship of our natural heritage. I think you guys do a phenomenal job out there, and I take my kids all the time to Big Bend Conservation Area. We spend a significant number of weekends over the summer there. So I wanted to thank you for that. I noticed that you mentioned providing access to a lot of these open spaces to residents, but I noticed in your presentation that there was one group that was notably absent in my view, and that was hunters and anglers. And I think it's worth mentioning that hunters and anglers are very much conservation minded, and I think that group in particular has a vested interest in the open spaces that we all love and care about. Hunting and fishing has grown tremendously in the last decade. We have 600,000 registered hunters in the province of Ontario, which is a 20% increase since 2010. That uptick in the desire of residents to access these spaces, I think, is notable. And I noticed that the Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority doesn't really mention that in any of the documents that you presented to council. I just wanted a comment on, is this something that is being considered by you folks? Is opening some of these areas to potentially public hunting? As lands are becoming more and more privatized, there is no space for a lot of these hunters and anglers to access these resources, which are sustainable, and it's a way for us to sustainably access that resource. And I think this is a recreational activity that's important to a lot of my residents, and I've heard this a number of times in my ward, that there is nowhere for these people to go to enjoy these resources. So I was just wondering if you could make a comment on, there's a number of tracts of land that you have. I just have a note here. So the Walter Devereux, there was also Sinclair's Bush, Rondo Bay Marshes, Big Bend. These are areas that may be potentially open to hunting sustainably and safely. And I just wondered if you could make a comment to that.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
The two things. First, we have a lot of hunting already engaged. Big Bend, Warwick, we host hunt camps. So starting in about a month, there is probably 8 or 10 different hunt camps that use are conservation areas.
As camping areas,
No, yeah, so they.
but not on the
they-
property, right?
Oh, no, on the property. No, but what they do is they go hunt, they have agreements with farmers around the area. They hunt and they and they hang the animals in different areas and they stay at the conservation area and that becomes their hunt camp. And we have, I think, 9 altogether or something like that. So we do support hunting in ways. One of our problems is that we don't own a lot of land. I'll give you an example. Gray Sawble Conservation Area owns 29,000 acres of land. We own 1,300 acres of land. And it's because farming is so good here, it's not available to put conservation areas. And we are expanding those as much as we can. We are doing a conservation land strategy, and hunting is something that we are considering for some of the large tracts and some of the tracts that don't have a lot of people in them. One of our problems with our conservation areas, we have only 1,300 acres, and some of those areas are almost being loved to death by so many people. So we have to be careful about introducing hunting when we have a lot of people, but definitely we will consider that as part of the land strategy and we'll continue supporting hunting. We're not in any way against hunting.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Denning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through the chair. Mark, thank you for your team being here with us this afternoon. You mentioned a couple of times about the new regulations. Does that tie in with the new PPS? And have you been consulted on that? And is that going to impact your organization and how?
Mr. Mayor? The new regulation, the thing that affects us most in our new regulation is a prohibitive regulation. We are prohibited by law to comment on natural heritage in planning. So we cannot review it by law. We cannot comment on it by law. I think we're the only organization in the province that has that type of restriction on it. But that is a prohibition of us. That doesn't mean we can't support your staff by providing information around natural heritage and all those things. And we have the expertise to do that. We can do that. What we can't do is make those specific comments on a development proposal. But those regulations are and that was never our main role. Our main role is dealing with flooding and erosion. And so those new regulations actually support that role more than in the past. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword a little bit. We would like to help our municipalities with natural heritage because in a lot of ways, it's going to cost municipalities more because they have to hire consultants, which we would do for the levy you pay us in the past. But there's enough extra stuff around the natural hazard stuff that we're going to be busy anyways, just trying to address those requirements of the regulations. So the regulation does prohibit us in some ways, but it also requires more of us in some ways in the other ends of things. So it is that double-edged sword.
Anything else? Okay. I thank you very much for a very interesting
Yeah, thank you.
talk there. Yeah. Okay, so can you please?
That West Elgin Council hereby receive the preliminary draft Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority watershed-based resource management strategy for information purposes.
Okay, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Denny. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Tellier. All in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Okay, we go to 4.2. Watson Associates. Daryl, would you like to come forward, please? All the best.
Thank
Take care.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, members of council. Pleasure to be here before you this evening. What we're going to talk about today is the development charge background study that we've completed, and we're going to be posting that on the municipality's website officially tomorrow to kickstart the 60-day notice period before you can consider the bylaw. So I'll take you through just an overview of those proposed charges and some of the things we talked about, the policies as we prepared the background study. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. So we started this process back in April, working with staff to collect a lot of the information. And I want to take a second to just thank staff for helping us put all the information together to prepare the background study and the calculations. We met with staff and had detailed staff interviews to talk about the potential capital needs associated with the growth that's coming in the next 10 and 20 years. And we were able to kind of start with the policy work to prepare the draft bylaw that's going to be included in the background study. So we're here today, kind of the day before releasing, just to give you a snapshot, allow you to ask questions, just so that when the background study goes into the public realm, if anyone reaches out to you to ask any questions, we've already had this initial discussion. From here, we'll have the formal public meeting that's required under the Act on October 24th. That's the plan. The public meeting will go over a lot of the same information. That one might be a little bit more brief, but really it's to provide a summary of the information for members of the public, because this document is a few hundred pages long. It's not super exciting if you're not into municipal finance. And so the public meeting presentation will summarize all the pertinent information. And then from there, the plan is on November 28th to have council consider and potentially pass a development charges bylaw. Next slide, please. And next slide. And so development charges are a revenue tool used by municipalities to recover the capital costs associated with new development. And so this is in addition to what a developer would normally construct as part of a subdivision. So if you think of a traditional subdivision, inside the subdivision, you have your internal roads. Under those roads, you have water mains, sewer mains, you got sidewalks, streetlights. Typically, the developer is going to pay for and install that. Development charges are to recover the capital costs for the broader infrastructure to connect the municipal system to that subdivision or to that development. We're empowered to impose these charges under the Development Charges Act, and this is the legislation that guides how we calculate the charges. One last note, typically development charges are imposed at the time of issuance of a building permit. There are some nuances based on some recent legislative changes, but generally that's when most developments will pay their development charge. Next slide, please. And so this slide really just summarizes the money has to come from somewhere. And so when we have new growth come to the municipality, if we need to invest in infrastructure, intersection improvements, lane widenings, turning lanes, et cetera, we have to spend that money. And so the money has to come from somewhere. And so to the extent that that cost relates to the new development, we can include that and recover that from development charges. Otherwise, it has to come from your existing taxpayers, your existing reserves, or if it's related to water and wastewater, your water and wastewater rates or reserves. Next slide, please. And so I won't go through all of this in great detail. The background study does have a detailed description of all of the legislative changes that have occurred, but just want to touch on the fact that development charges aren't new. And so they've been around since the 50s. They've been called lot levies, and they were imposed under the Planning Act. We had a formal piece of legislation in 1989, which was revised and scoped down a bit in 1997. It was largely untouched until 2019, which you can see since 2019, there's been 8 different changes to the legislation, probably some more that are coming in the next year or so. But what we've done is incorporated all of these legislative changes into the draft bylaw and the calculations. Next slide, please. And so the legislation guides how we calculate the charge, but very simply, first thing we need to do is identify the amount, type, and location of growth. So is it going to be residential subdivisions over here, maybe a commercial development over here? And once we understand the amount, type, and location of growth, then we can identify the servicing needs to accommodate that growth. So, for example, maybe it's recreational needs. From there, item 3 says, well, what are the specific capital costs to meet that servicing need to accommodate the growth? And so what you'll see in the background study in chapter 4 is a list of all the different projects we are anticipating the municipality is going to need to accommodate the new development, whether completely required to accommodate the new development or in part benefits the new development and the existing community. From there, what we need to do is make a series of deductions because we can't just take the total cost and apply that to new development. We need to make sure it's only that growth related cost. And so we have to deduct any grants, subsidies, or other contributions we're anticipating to receive, any amounts that benefit the existing community. So the easiest way to think of this is if I'm taking a facility, knocking it down and building a bigger one, I need to give credit for the developers that there was an existing facility there. We're going to be replacing it. That's kind of like asset management. We shouldn't charge the developers for that. We're only going to charge them for the incremental size of that new facility. If there's any amounts in excess of this historical level of service calculation we have to do, and this could be something for future development charge studies, but if there's balances in the development charge reserve funds, you would deduct those off. Once we have the net costs that are related to new development, we allocate it between residential and non-residential benefit divided by the growth in those categories, and that's how we're going to calculate the charge. Next slide, please. So put very simply, we take the costs associated with new development divided by the new development, and what we're going to come up with is a residential charge per unit and a non-residential charge per square foot or per square meter of floor space of that new development. Next slide, please. And so the Development Charges Act allows municipalities to include 19 different services in a development charge bylaw. So as long as the service is something that you provide or there's capital costs associated with what you're providing, then it can be included. And so what we've highlighted here in the teal blue color is services related to a highway, which is really your roads and public works, fire protection services, and parks and recreation services. In addition, it's not listed there, but we're allowed to include growth studies. So the development charge background study itself can be recovered from development charges and paid for with development charges, official plans, things like that. So we've included that in the analysis. Now, I'll note we did not include the water and wastewater development charges, and this is very similar to what we just did recently in Dutton Dunwich, is we did a review. But you have a capital charge already that's imposed on new development to recover capital costs. And so that capital charge is sufficient to recover the costs. So there's no requirement to have a development charge. Next slide, please. So just wanted to put out the table of contents so you can see what the background study itself looks like. Again, it's a little bit of a long document. Unfortunately, it's really a requirement of the legislation to hit all these points. So we need to make sure that we talk about all these things. What I want to highlight as the important parts is chapter 2. We'll talk about that amount, type, and location of growth. So how much we're going to develop by. Chapter 4, we'll talk about all those specific capital costs. And then chapter 5 will undertake the development charge calculation, taking those costs divided by the growth to come up with the charges. Okay. And obviously, if you want a more brief version of the report, the executive summary will, again, hit all the highlights. Next slide, please. And next slide. And so when we're looking at the calculations, we need to start with that growth forecast. And so what we're looking at is over the next 10 years, growing by 491 people and just under 360 residential homes and 540,300 square feet of non-residential floor space. Over the longer term, the 20-year term, we're looking at just under 1,100 people, just under 790 units, and just under 1.2 million square feet of floor space. Next slide, please. And next slide. And so before we look at the capital costs and identify those costs to undertake the calculations, one of the things we have to do is look at your historical level of service so that what we've provided on average in the past is not more, we're not going to provide more than that and make sure that the developers pay more than that. No, we have to do this calculation. It's a mathematical calculation that's in Appendix B to the study, and we do that for every service. And we have to look at the quantity and quality measures of service over the last 15 years. Next slide, please. And so this is a summary of the analysis, but on the very far right is the maximum level of service. So what this means is based on the calculations that we've done, that's the maximum amount we could impose under development charges. And so this happens in almost all communities. The services related to a highway, the roads, it's very high relative to your capital budget. I think you know that you're not going to be spending over $70 million on roads, but we have that level of service as we could if we needed to. Public Works, we've done the math, and it's just over that 2 million mark. So we could impose a development charge where we're collecting just over $2 million. Okay, and so we've done that for fire, parks and recreation, and we did look at library services as well. Next slide, please. And so for the capital costs of what we can include in the development charge calculation, there is a definition in the Development Charges Act. And so what we can include is we can acquire land or an interest in land. We can improve the land. So if you need to put fencing, landscaping, et cetera. You can acquire, lease, construct, or improve buildings, facilities, and structures. And so this includes the furniture and equipment that go in those facilities. Equipment and rolling stock really refers to your vehicles and your equipment. So pickup trucks for public works or mowers for parks and recreation, for example. And if you're going to lease anything, whether it's vehicles or facilities, you can include the capital component of that lease. Circulation materials for libraries is specifically called out in the definition. But I believe that's a county responsibility, so that's why we didn't include circulation materials in the analysis here. Studies for the above, including the development charge background study itself, so we've included that. And then if you did need to debt finance any of these projects that are identified, we can include the interest cost as well. Next slide, please. So we're allowed to look at any time horizon. The Development Charges Act used to provide a limitation on that. It doesn't anymore. But typically what we do with most municipalities is look out over 10 years for most services, 20 years potentially for roads and those kind of services. I mentioned we have to reduce the cost by any grants that you're going to receive. The third bullet there really just means that if there's a cost incurred, let's say, by a board. So let's say the Tri-County Water Board has a capital cost for development in your municipality. You could recover that through development charges if you needed to. And then the last bullet there talks about some of the capital costs that are explicitly listed as excluded from being eligible. Parkland acquisition, that's because you get parkland through parkland dedication through the Planning Act. So you can't use development charges to purchase parkland, but you can improve it with development charges. The vehicles and equipment have to have a life of 7 years or more, and the computer equipment that's not integral to providing the service, we're not allowed to include. So I think back when the legislation was written, computers played a far different role in our lives back in 1997. But today, really what this refers to is mainly kind of laptops that are sitting in front of you or laptops that administration is using. Next slide, please. So again, the details are provided in the background study, but just at a high level, what we're looking at in total capital costs is about $17.6 million. And you can see 13.7 of that relates to roads and related infrastructure. Going across, we have some other deductions. So we had to make deductions on studies where they didn't relate specifically to the eligible services. We had to make deductions for benefit to existing development. So again, looking at those projects on a project by project basis and determining how much of this really is just rehabbing or repairing an existing issue versus what are we expanding to accommodate the growth. Grants, subsidies, and other contributions we've deducted. And so you can see from that $17.6 million total capital cost, what we're including in the charge is $9.4 million. Okay, so just over half. Next slide, please. And next slide. So when we put all that together, what we've calculated here are charges for residential units. I mentioned earlier that it's based on a per unit, based on the different categories. And these categories, the cost is identified based on the assumed average persons per unit or the persons in those units. And so we have for single detached and semi-detached homes, the charge being $9,951 per unit. Other multiples are townhomes and row houses, so that's just under $8,200 a unit. Apartments, we've separated into larger apartments, so 2 bedrooms or more, $6,532 a unit. And the smaller apartments and special care dwellings, about $3,842 a unit. Okay, on the non-residential side, the cost would be $3.23 per square foot. Next slide. Next slide. The next question I always get is, okay, so how does that compare to other communities? And so looking at the municipalities in your area, you can see, and we just passed the Dutton Dunwich development charge couple months ago. You can see it's just slightly higher than them, just below Malahide, below Elmer and Strathroy. On the right side, you'll see BAM, for example. They actually have development charges, but what we've excluded from here is the water and wastewater development charges because we're not looking to impose those. So BAM only has development charges for water and wastewater. So generally in the middle, a little bit upper range of the middle based on this area. Next slide, please. For non-residential charges, kind of in the middle again, kind of in the lower end of the middle, just above Southwold, just under Central Elgin, and still under Malahide Elmer. And you can see Dutton Dunwich's charge was quite higher than what we've calculated for yourselves. Next slide, please. Now, for industrial development charges, and when we get to the policy matters, something to consider is a number of the municipalities exempt industrial from having to pay development charges. So there is a mandatory exemption or reduction for expansions already in the legislation, but these a number of these communities have gone further, just like Dutton Dunwich, and exempted industrial completely. Next slide, please. And next slide. And so at the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned most developers or developments will pay their development charge at the time of building permit issuance. There are some nuances depending on the type of development. So if you are bringing forward rental housing or institutional developments, you pay your development charge in installments. So first installment upon occupancy, each year for the next 5 years, you'll pay equal installments. If you apply for your development through site plan or zoning bylaw amendment, your development charge rate is frozen when you submit your complete application. And that's to give these types of developments some assurance what the rate is going to be as they go through the development process, as they've done their pro formas on a certain rate. And so when they submit the application, the municipality will review it. Once you approve the application, they then have a year and a half or 18 months to then start pulling building permits. If they do that within that time frame, great, their rate's frozen as of the date they submitted their application, right? And so if someone submitted an application today, for example, your rate's zero. So, it could take you a year and a half, 2 years to review their application. And once you approve it, they still have another year and a half before they have to pay a development charge. Next slide, please. And so I mentioned the legislation has a number of mandatory exemptions. And so upper tier, lower tier governments don't charge each other development charges, similar to school boards. Industrial buildings can expand up to 50% of their footprint and they don't have to pay a development charge. Universities are exempt. And then there's a number of residential exemptions. And so if I have a detached unit, a townhouse, a semi-detached unit, I can put up to 2 apartments on the lot, on the property, and I don't have to pay development charges on those apartments. And so that could be 2 basement apartments. It could be 1 basement apartment, 1 apartment on a garage. I don't have to pay development charges on those. There's for existing rental residential buildings, 1 additional unit or 1% of the existing units in the building. Affordable units required from inclusionary zoning. Nonprofit housing is exempt. And then there's affordable rental and own units. And just at the bottom, there's attainable exemption. But the definition has not yet been provided by the province, so that will come at some later date. There's also a discount for rental housing. So not only do they get to pay in installments, they also get a discount based on the number of bedrooms that they have, between 15 to 25% off each unit. Next slide, please. And so on top of those mandatory exemptions that we have to follow, council does have discretion to impose reductions or exemptions in the bylaw. And so you can reduce the charge in whole or in part for different types or classes of development. So I mentioned the example, maybe you want to exempt all industrial development. Right now, for the draft bylaw, what we've included is the two most common exemptions across the province, which is places of worship and bona fide farms. But as we go through the process, the public meeting, and when you get to the bylaw consideration, you can add exemptions. So if you wanted to add industrial exemption, for example, you do have the ability to do that. Okay. With respect to the charge, we can phase that charge in over time. And then as well, one of the things we have to consider is redevelopment credits. So if someone knocks down a house and builds two houses, we're only going to charge them for the additional house, not the first house. Okay. Next slide, please. So with respect to the charge, once it's calculated, imposed by the bylaw, every year it will be indexed to try to remain consistent with capital costs. And the Development Charge Act does provide for the index that we have to follow for that. So every year the charge will just go up or down based on that index. Next slide, please. Okay, last couple slides here. So one thing I just wanted to touch on was the local service policy. So this is an Appendix E to the background study. And at the very beginning, I said development charges are in addition to what a developer would normally pay as part of their subdivision. This policy sets out what is their responsibility versus what would we include in the development charge background study. So then it's very clear for a developer who comes in and says, well, what's my cost? What do I have to pay for? It's in that policy. And then as well, it also assists staff when you're reviewing plans and determining should the developer be paying for this sidewalk that's connecting their development to our existing system, even if it's 500 meters away. It's in the policy so they understand what's clear. Next slide, please. And next slide. So in terms of next steps, just to reiterate, so we're going to be advertising for the public meeting being on October 24th. At that point, council or the public will have the chance to address council, ask any questions. And then a month after that is when we would consider the bylaw. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deputy Mayor Telly.
Through the chair, just had a question. I think it was slide 27 about exemptions. So what if there's mixed housing, like nonprofit and then other housing within the same dwelling? Was there a calculation that would happen with that?
Yeah, so through the mayor, so depending on what the development looks like, if you had some units that met the criteria of one exemption and some units that didn't, then yeah, they would be prorated based on the charge relative to the units that should be charged and the exemption for those units that shouldn't be charged.
Anyone else with a question for Daryl? Thank you very much. It's fairly complicated, and yeah, it takes a little bit to get your head around.
Easy.
It rolled off your tongue pretty easy, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I'll just note that if there's any questions in between now and the public meeting through staff, they can send me the questions in advance and I can try to incorporate that into the presentation at the public meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Recommendation is that West Elgin Council hereby receive the development charges background study dated September 27th, 2024, and that council instruct the clerk to post the report on the municipal website for public review and comment. And further, that council instruct the clerk to proceed with the notification for a public meeting held in accordance with the Development Charges Act on October 24th, 2024.
Thank you. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Statham. Seconded. Deputy Mayor Tellier. All in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Now, our next delegation. Okay, so we'll skip that for now. Our next delegation, we're going to leave it for a little bit. She's going to be a little late, I think.
Yeah, I sent you, I copied you on.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll go to 5. Adoption of the minutes.
That West Elgin Council hereby adopt the minutes of the September 12th, 2024 regular meeting and the September 23rd, 2024 special meeting as presented.
Okay, a mover, please. Councillor Statham. Seconded. Councillor Denning. All in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Business arising from the minutes. Seeing none, we go to staff reports. Operations. Monthly operations reports, August 2024. That's what we've all read, is it? Okay. Can we go for recommendation for that then, please?
That West Elgin Council hereby receives the August 2024 monthly operations report from Lee Gosnell, Manager of Operations and Community Services, for information purposes.
Okay, mover, please. Deputy Mayor Telly, seconded. Councillor Statham, all in favour? It's carried. 7.2. We go to the clerks. 7.21, by-election information.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So bringing this report to council today as a follow-up from last meeting, just a little bit more details regarding the cost of a by-election. So in the previous report, it was estimated at about 13,000, and as indicated on the report, initial estimation for it would be 20 to 25. However, yesterday afternoon, I received a little bit more information from DataFix and VoterView with some additional fees that would be added to it. So now the cost is estimated between about $25,650. So just a few things to go over with the report. So of course, there's the two options. Option 1 being fill the vacancy by call of applications and appointment. And then option 2 would be filling the vacancy by holding a by-election. Calling for applications and appointments, we can have the seat filled. I'm estimating November 14th council meeting. The timeline is indicated in there in my report. So that's about a 6 weeks from now. By-election, because it's going to be right in the middle of the Christmas holidays, will be right in there. So we wouldn't be able to have a councillor it says Ward 1, but that's Ward 3, take a seat until early February. So it's quite a lengthy process. That councillor would then miss out on the budget deliberations, whereas if we have somebody in there for November, they'll be part of that discussion as well. So some other things just to keep in mind, the timing, as I just mentioned. Cost savings would be approximately $25,000 if we went the route of direct appointment, because it's just a matter of having the advertising in the paper for a couple weeks, which is ready to go if that's what council chooses to do. Unfortunately, with a by-election, regular elections, often meetings are reduced. There's a lot less going on in the municipal office because the elections do take up a significant amount of time. Typically, it's all in the clerk's department, whether it be the clerk and then municipal election workers, deputy clerks, whatever it may be. It's all in the clerk's department. Expenses are non-negotiable for an election. In my consultations with multiple partners, as I said, election expenses, they are what they are. We have to pay them. which then, of course, that cost comes from the taxpayers' dollars. So even if we were having it for one ward, it'd be coming from taxpayers' dollars for the entire ward. So I think that's most of the points that I just wanted to bring up prior to council's decision. And certainly, if anybody has any questions, concerns, I'm happy to answer.
Yes, does anybody want to speak on that right now? Yes. Council, Deputy Mayor Tellier.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm just wondering, if you can remind me how long before, in an election year, like a real, actual election year, are we sitting that we're not to make decisions under the municipal act? I can't remember what that term is called. Lame duck?
Lame
Sitting
The
duck?
lame duck.
Yeah, lame duck, that's it.
I can't recall the exact date, but I can certainly get that information
Well,
for you.
because what I'm thinking is,
Yeah.
if we have an election, and as you said, they can't, I didn't even think about the budget time, but can't get them into, to do budget deliberations and be part of that and have those decisions. And then really, they're only sitting there making decisions with us for such a short time frame, because then we have that in the election year. And what's our election year?
2026.
Six, yeah,
Mhm.
so not really that far away if you think about it.
Mhm.
So I'm just a little worried about that as well. So, yeah, I would go with the option A to fill it by appointing a person that has applied, just on the facts of the money, the time frame, and what it looks like for them to being appointed. So that's my thoughts there. And then the lame duck too, that we can't make decisions then. We're just kind of going through the motions at times, not really, but kind of. So, yeah, that was my thoughts there. And I think we have great data, and thank you for all that too in the background. And what we didn't include was all your time to put this together and the report and everything. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay. Anyone else want to speak on it? Councillor Statham, please.
Thank you very much. And through the chair, I would echo Deputy Mayor's statements. I think, in my view, we're looking at a relatively short time frame between now and the next election for this position. I think that based on the last estimate, we had a cost of about $13,000, and I'm very cognizant that there is a certain appetite in the community to have a by-election. And I certainly am happy to accommodate that within reason. I think if the cost has exceeded, it's almost double, if I understand correctly, what we looked at the previous appointment. So we went from $13,000 to $25,000, and the time frame is significantly less. So we're looking at maybe a year when you include the lame duck, period. So, in my view, I think it would be foolish of us to spend that kind of money for a short period of time. I think that we'd be far better off to invest that money back into the municipality. And then the next election is going to come up in 2026, and we can move on from there. So that's my thought. And
Okay, so you'd be looking at option A.
correct.
Okay.
Correct. Thank you.
Anything to say?
Not much now. Through the chair, thank you. All of my thoughts and feelings have been effectively communicated by our deputy mayor and Councillor Statham. For all the same reasons, I feel that option A is the most appropriate.
Yep. And myself, I echo exactly what I've just heard, so it looks like it's unanimous for 4As.
The
Could you
recommendation
please?
is that West Elgin Council hereby receives the report from Terry Toshuk, clerk, regarding by-election versus direct appointment for 2024 council vacancy, and that council direct the clerk to proceed with option 1, being a call for applications and appointment to fill the vacancy of Councillor Ward 3 for the remainder of the 2022 to 2026 term of council.
Okay, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Denning, seconded. Deputy Mayor Tellier, all in favour? It's carried. 7.2 pardon? Oh, sorry.
I apologize through the chair. Just a quick question. I wondered, Madam Clerk, if you wouldn't mind, please getting me I would like to see exactly how the appointment process works.
Sure.
So if you don't mind, if you could send me a document that outlines that, just so that I can familiarize myself with it, I would appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Okay, moving on, 7.2.2, scholarship award policy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report is provided to council today with just a sample of Southwold's scholarship policy. It was noted in our August meeting about possibly using some grant money to give to students to help out with some college or university expenses. So this is just brought back as a sample to see if this is what council is looking to proceed with, or get some more feedback from council.
Anybody like to speak on that? Deputy Mayor Tully, please.
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, this looks great. I'm not sure about the amount still. It might depend upon each budget. So I'm not sure what the rest of council's thinking, if we want to put something in place so we always know each year for the budget, or if we want to look at whatever could be left over from our council grants each year. I'm not sure what the appetite is around the room to do that or not. It just could depend on what's going on that year.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak on that?
Makes perfect sense to me. I think.
Yeah, I go along with that personally too. Okay, so we'll have the,
Which option
we want?
is council thinking they'll use? Pardon?
you spoke on it.
Yeah, but do we want to use, set it up so that every year it's a specific amount of money? Or do we want to see what is left over in the grant? Because I can create the policy with either option.
Yeah, through the chair, that's what I was asking around the
Yeah.
table. Do we want to make it
Okay.
a set amount? Is it easier for, and treasurer purposes, for bookkeeping to make it a set amount? Or is it easier to each year look at that and see what we have for council grants in the, say, August for October? I call it convocation, but graduation, whatever it is.
I'm looking
Commencement.
at, I'm looking at,
What would be easier for
Okay.
paperwork?
It would be very transparent if we incorporate that into our following year's budget.
okay, then we know exactly what we're using.
Yes.
That's, I think that's the way.
From a policy perspective too, that would be much easier because it's outlined exactly that it's going to be this amount. There's the due date for the applications. Everything's going to be in
Yeah.
black and white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
agree. Thank
Okay.
you.
great.
I'm sorry. So that's the $1,000 per recipient times 2. So it would
Correct.
be
That, and that's also
$2,000.
council's decision whether we want to have one recipient or two, or however many council chooses to do.
Yes. Deputy Mayor.
Through the chair, I'm going to be picky. We've got a lot of kids that don't go to school here for specialized things all
Mhm.
over the place.
Mhm.
I don't know how we put that in there too.
Okay.
Like, we don't just have kids that go to one high school. We have kids that go 4, 5 if you count that one. So I don't know if we just pick, I don't know, now making
A
it
West
difficult.
Elgin resident?
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, because I think those children are sometimes not recognized. Like, example, we have a speech competition and it's only recognized for West Elgin. We have art at our fair board sometimes and only West Elgin students can apply and put their art in. It's just one section of the fair. They can put their art and other stuff.
Okay.
But one whole section of the fair is only for students from West Elgin. So those kids are, yeah. And I think, I made me think of something like that because when we had our fair ambassadors this year, one was off in university and the other two, one was currently at West Elgin, but hadn't gone to West Elgin until this year. And then the other one didn't go to school in the area either. So it made me think that maybe we should expand it to residents of West Elgin
Mhm.
instead of just the school, like the one school.
Absolutely.
I don't know, whatever everyone else is after me. Just thought of that when we saw that who was running for ambassador and the representation that was on the stage.
I think residents of West Elgin personally.
I know, I think that's what Ralph Southwold
Mhm.
said.
Yeah. So is it going to be for one recipient or are we going to do two?
Through the
Yes,
chair.
Councillor Denny.
I don't think that there's much more of a worthy cause than giving some of our residents a leg up on continuing education. So I would be supportive of doing 2 a year.
Here, here.
I would agree wholeheartedly with that. I think post-secondary education is of paramount importance. So I would definitely agree with that. I have two.
Okay.
Through the chair, post-secondary of any age. So, yeah, we didn't think about that, did we? Yeah, that'd be great as well.
Okay, I think we've sorted that one, haven't we?
I've got
Thank
some
you.
notes. Yep, thank you. The recommendation is that West Elgin Council hereby receives the report from Terry Toshchuk clerk regarding scholarship award policy, and that council approve the policy in theory and direct the clerk to prepare a scholarship policy for the municipality of West Elgin to be included in the 2025 budget.
Okay, mover please. Deputy Mayor Tellier, seconded. Councillor Denning, all in favour? Carried.
We're starting it next year then?
Now, what is Mrs. Scrimshaw? Is she on now or not?
Not yet.
If you Okay.
want to take a break, it's
I think we'll take a little break right now, and then we'll be ready for the winter. Thank you.
Yeah, when I was on my phone, it's because I couldn't remember if it was called sitting duck or lame duck.
Okay, so we carry on with our meeting, and welcome, Christine.
Thank you for waiting for me. I appreciate that. I had another meeting at 5, so I went quickly to that and came back.
Okay, can we just leave you to carry on then, please?
Sure, that's great. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I believe you have our draft financial statements in your package, so I'll go through them page by page, as is the norm. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask, and we'll hopefully get have the answers for you. I wanted to start out with some preamble first because there are a couple things in these financial statements that are different, and so I just wanted to make mention of those. First off, I'll remind the council that these are consolidated financial statements, and that's because we pick up the Port Glasgow Yacht Club's records in your financial statements because you do own that land, and under PSAB, the Public Sector Accounting Board requirements, that does require you then to consolidate their activities into your records. And so I work with their accountant to get their numbers and then get them consolidated into these financial statements. The other piece of this is if you'll remember back a few years ago when Tri-County first got set up, we consolidated the whole system into these financial statements. As of 2022, we changed that and we only consolidate the proportionate amount that you own, which is the 43.24% of the system as per the agreement. The other thing I wanted to make mention of is the asset retirement obligation. So there's a new standard set by PSAB this past year for the year ended 2023 was the first year it was required. And that's where we set up an asset retirement obligation for future costs that relate to assets that we were going to have to do some rehabilitation on. So that could be buildings and pipe with asbestos, or it could be, in your case, the asset that we looked at was the landfill. So in the past, we have not been accruing that amount, but this is the amount that once the landfill is filled, we would have to cap it. And so this would be the cost in today's dollars that we think we're going to have to pay for that. And that was provided by your consultant to us. And so that's included as a liability now in these financial statements. And what that really means is that in the future years, you're going to have to raise those taxation dollars in order to pay for that capping. And at the present, it's estimated to be in the year 2050. And I know that there's some work going on even as I speak. I think right now that is looking at seeing if that's still a good year and reconciling the amounts of garbage that has been put into that landfill on a yearly basis. And I chatted with Mr. Gosnell on that. So that's the two big changes. The last one I would just want to make mention of, please remember that 2022 was still predominantly COVID. 2023 is the first full year, or 2022 had several months that were still under COVID restrictions. 2023 is the first year of full, not COVID. So we'll see that in some of the numbers as well. So I'll go through by page. My page number 1 is the independent auditor's report. So this is saying that in the audit world, these are draft financial statements. They were dated to today's date, which hopefully under Canadian auditing standards, those charged with governance, which would be you, the council, will approve them, and then we'll be able to finalize these financial statements and submit them to the province. And it is, as I said, a clean auditor's opinion, which means that I did not find any material corrections that I needed to make beyond what's in these financial statements. So I'll go through the numbers and hopefully I hit the points that you have at your review want answered. So the first statement is the consolidated statement of financial position. So this is really your balance sheet, and this is where you're at December 31st, 2023, which is your fiscal year end. So as I've gone through these many times, the net financial asset line, about 3/4 of the way down the page, is really where I go first. So that is really what the money you would have in the bank if everybody paid you what they owed you and you were able to pay off all of your debts. And so you can see there that there's about a $1.4 million increase from last year, which is a good indication that you're financially moving forward. And we'll see when we get to the reserve funds that really flows through to those reserve funds. Everything below that line are items you have to have in place in order to provide the services. So your roads, your buildings, water, wastewater services. And you can see there, so that the next thing I look at is, are you replacing your assets? Is your asset value going up? And if you add the tangible capital assets plus the capital work in progress, you have in fact increased about $500,000 from last year, and that's after your amortization costs. So amortization is the using up of the assets, and that was about 1.6 million. So you've increased your assets significantly from last year above and beyond the amortization value. The next line I look at is up above under liabilities. That last line, net long-term liabilities, you can see that you have not taken out any new debt this year. So that's very low debt for a municipality your size. In fact, I think you're the lowest of any of my debt. Any of my municipalities that are carrying debt right now, that's a very small amount. And all of your debt is what we call user charges. So that means that specific either water users or municipal drain owners are the ones paying that debt off. So it's not coming out of your tax rate. The line above that asset retirement obligation, that's what we were talking about with regards to the landfill. So you can see it's at $400,000, which is the amount that was estimated. And all of that comes down to what's your accumulated surplus at the end of the year, almost 8 million, compared to just over 52 million at the end of 2022. So all good news stories there. Any questions on any of that?
Any questions, anyone? Seeing none?
Okay, I'll move on to the next page. So this is your revenues and expenditures, and this shows the budget that the council approved for 2023 versus the actual for 2023 and then the actual for 2022. And so I just have a couple comments on this. So under revenue, the revenue budgeted versus actual, it's a little bit higher in actual, and there's really a couple reasons for that. One is the investment income line. As you can remember, in 2022, interest rates hovered around 1%. 2023, obviously that percent increased, and so your money was earning more interest than we had budgeted, which I'm seeing this consistently in all of the financial statements I'm doing for 2023. The other line is that other revenue. So that's there's a couple items in there, and they weren't budgeted for because you weren't aware you were getting them when you passed the budget. One is the Craftville hockey amount that you got, and the other is the amount that came over from the Rodney Cemetery. So when we get to the trust fund statements, we now have that money in our trust funds. And then one of the not requirements, but suggestions that they made was to give you some monies from those monies that they gave you. And so that those two items are in the actual 2023, but not in the budget because we did not know we were getting them at the time of the budget. Under expenditures, so it would appear from this that the budget expenditure is just under 10 million, and yet our actuals were 11.4. That is because if council remembers, in the budget, you do not budget for amortization, and amortization was 1.6 million. And so if you take the difference between what your budget and your actual is, it's almost bang on the 1.6 million. So you actually were very close in spending the amount that was budgeted by council if you take amortization out of the actual number. And then coming down to that line called excess of revenue over expenditures, you see last year it was 419,000, this year it's 705,000, and that's another indicator I'm looking at to make sure that your operating revenues are covering your operating costs. And in fact, and with the amortization and in fact, yours increased by 300,000. Everything below that line are items that relate to capital. And again, the timing, so the government transfers are lower than what was budgeted, but that's really just the timing of the capital projects. We're not eligible to claim the grants until the projects are done. And the main one was the sewer system work that you're doing. So that will come as the project is completed. And then you'll see on the actual for 2022, there's a note 2 underneath that, and that shows the bringing in that asset retirement obligation, the 382.50 at the beginning of 2022 to get it onto the balance sheet that we had. Coming down to the surplus again at the end of the year of just over 52 million. So 53 million. Any questions on that at all?
Yes, we do have one. Councillor Denny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through the chair. Christine, thank you very much. Just a quick question. I noticed that consistently over 2 years, we generate more revenue from user charges than we do for property taxation. And I know that you do audits for a lot of different municipalities. Is that the norm?
That's a really good question. It's usually pretty close, and I'll tell you why, because water and wastewater revenues have really skyrocketed over the last couple of years, last 5 years, really, when we've gone to the full recovery rates and then the building permits as well. So those, yes, that would be fairly consistent, yes.
Thank you.
And you can see by budget as well that that's the case. I will remind council that the water wastewater rates, that net income does not, gets moved over into their own reserve fund. So none of the water wastewater revenues or expenses affects your general surplus. They're all user pay. So if you took those out, then that wouldn't be the case, is really where I'm going with that.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Seeing none.
Okay, we then have a couple of statements. One is the statement of cash flow. So this is the increases and decreases of the non-cash items on the balance sheet. And as you can see, the large numbers that are on this statement are all to do with capital. So the amortization, I was talking about the 1.6 million of amortization. So there it is. And then the acquisition of new assets, again, significant this year. So if you take that amortization and then both the increase in tangible capital assets and the increase in WIP, that's where I was coming up with that $500,000 net increase from the previous year. Coming down to cash and cash equivalents again, about $1.3 million higher than last year. And we'll see that over in the reserves when we get to that note. And then the next statement just really focuses on those capital assets and those changes. And so we've kind of gone through all those numbers a couple times now, so I'll leave that one as well. Then we get to what we call the notes to the financial statements, and these are fairly consistent with the prior years, other than the asset retirement note, which basically walks us through how we got to the net change on the financial statements and the discussion on the whole landfill closure. the note that I think, well, I'll draw a couple of attention to a couple things. One is your deferred revenue obligatory reserve funds. So this is those reserves that you as council can't dictate where they're spent, the rules around them. So one is the federal gas tax, one is the provincial gas tax, now called, or federal's now called CCBF, and OCIF. So their granting tells you what you can and can't spend it on. I heard the presentation, most of the presentation on the DCs that you just had. And so this is where DCs would be picked up as well, because you do not, the DCs, obviously, from what your consultant just explained, have to be spent on those areas where the DCs are raised to spend money on. You can't take, you as council can't decide that you want to take the DCs raised for roads and use it on recreation, for instance. So that's why they're called obligatory reserve funds as opposed to your regular reserve funds. The next note is your long-term liabilities, and this is just the debt. And as I said, it's all from ratepayers, and you can see there that it's quite small. And as I said, it's significantly smaller than any of my other clients. The note I think council would be most interested in is the accumulated surplus, note number 10. And so if you, I've been mentioning this increase in reserves. And so if you take the 2023 reserves and reserve funds and add them together and compare them to 2022, it's about 1.3 million, which is where we saw the bank balance go up as well, excuse me. So that's that this is a breakdown of your net surplus of that $53 million. And that the asset retirement you see is in the brackets, which really is just indicating that in the future, we need to raise the money to pay for that closing of the landfill. And then we have two schedules at the back of the financial statements. One is the breakdown of the capital assets by components. And as you can see, there's a significant, the majority of your assets, about 45% of them are in the roads, bridges, and water wastewater systems, which is what you would expect to see. And then the last schedule is a breakdown of revenues and expenditures by functions. So the FIR, which is the financial information return that is filed with the province, breaks down all your revenues and expenditures like this. And so that's why we do this schedule at the back. It's a segue between these audited financial statements and the reporting. It's about a 50-page report that goes into the province with all sorts of all of your numbers on it that ties into this schedule at the back. And then in addition, you have the trust fund financial statement, and I've really kind of talked about that already. It had a significant change this year. So before this year, it was just that $1,000 that the Schleihoff, am I saying that right? Family left the municipality many years ago. And that was what was always there. This year, we got that money from Rodney Cemetery. We paid out what they requested that was paid out, and what's left then is the money in the note. If you go to note, sorry, I'm just number 2, it breaks it down. So what's left in the Rodney Cemetery Company is $387,704. And again, that earns some interest from when we took those funds into, and it's in a separate bank account. Just want to stop and thank also your staff, and particularly your treasurer, for assistance during this audit process, and Mr. Godnell as well, because of the getting the asset retirement obligation figured out. It's been a long year for sure. So I know that they're happy to see these statements finally get done. So I appreciate their help.
Thank you very much. Is there any other questions from council? Yeah, Councillor Denning just has one quick question.
Sure,
Chair.
I'm here as long as you need me.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And again, Christine, thank you. So next year, maybe not so much next year, but the year after, we're going to start seeing a little bit of revenue coming in from an investment that we've made with some of our reserve funds. How will that revenue be allocated, and will there be any restrictions on it?
So it has to, so those obligatory, what I call the obligatory reserve funds, we don't have separate bank accounts for those. So those have to get the interest at a current rate added to them. That's part of the legislation around those. And that will be the case with, if you go the route of DC, of development charges as well. So that has to be allocated to those first, as well as the water wastewater systems have to have allocation of revenue to them, their bank accounts as well as Tri-County. So those all are sort of obligations of the municipality to make sure that all of those funds are trued up, because you don't have separate bank accounts for them all. So we have to make sure that we've given them their due revenue from those investments. And then the rest would go to the general fund, and it would really be up to council how they want to allocate that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. That certainly answered his question. Anybody else? Okay, could I have the recommendation, please?
That West Elgin Council hereby approves the 2023 draft consolidated financial statements as presented by Christine Scrimgore and Company CPA Professional Corporation as presented.
Move it, please. Councillor Statham. Seconded by Councillor Denning. All in favour? It's carried. Thank you, Christine.
Sorry, you also need to do a resolution on the trust fund one as well, please, if you don't mind.
The recommendation is that West Elgin Council hereby approves the 2023 trust funds financial statements as presented by Christine Scrimgore and Company CPA Professional Corporation as presented.
Okay, could I have a mover for that then? Deputy Mayor Tellier, seconded. Councillor Statham, all in favour? It's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you all too.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, so we move on because we had a bit of a gap. We go to 8, committee and board reports or updates. The Old Town Hall, Oovat Community Centre, Recreation, Heritage Homes, Rodney Park. Anybody got anything to say right now? Okay. Notice of motion. There was none received. Councillors' inquiries, announcements. It's just that I attended the seniors do today over at the health centre. It went really well. It was well attended. Probably 75 people to 100 there. It went really well. Anything else from anybody? Councillor Statham.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, just wanted to mention that we had an event last night that was phenomenal. It was a sort of a group event between the economic development committees for Southwold, Dutton Dunwich, and West Elgin. And it was a phenomenal a collaboration. It was very successful. I think we got a lot out of it, so just wanted to bring that forward. The other thing I wanted to mention was the Roots and Revival Festival that's coming up. I think a lot of the members of the community have been working really hard to get this off the ground. I think it's looking to be a very successful event, and that's coming up. So I would encourage any residents that are listening to please attend. It's a week-long celebration of our farming heritage and what we do here as a municipality. So that's in the works, and October 5th to 12th should be a great event. I'm looking forward to it. So.
I did, just going back, I did bring that up today at the seniors do too.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. We got to spread the word.
Yeah.
Make sure that we have some attendance. So that's great. Thanks.
Okay, that was the council inquiries. Correspondence. We go into a recommendation for that, please.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does any council members want to pull any of the items for discussion or move forward with the recommendation?
Okay.
The The recommendation is that West Elgin Council hereby receive and file all correspondence not otherwise dealt with.
Okay, mover, please. Councillor Denning. Seconded. Councillor Statham, all in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to items requiring consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the first item for consideration is just to receive the letter that was received from Warden Ketchbaugh from the County of Elgin, just reconfirming their support for the library in Rodney moving forward. And they also included their policy for it when the plans move forward with the new library.
Okay, thank
The
you.
recommendation is that West Elgin Council hereby acknowledge receipt of the letter dated September 12th, 2024 from Warden Ed Ketchbaugh, County of Elgin, regarding Elgin County support for the future of the Rodney Library.
Okay. Mover. Deputy Mayor Tellier, seconder. Councillor Statham, all in favour? It's carried. Thank you.
Item 12.2 is West Lorne Minor Hockey Association, a letter of direction. So according to our current agreement for the it'd be the Bo Horvat Community Association. The executive committee for the minor hockey needs to prepare a recommendation for who they would like to have their as a representative on the Bo Horvat Community Center Board of Management. So they have recommended Jessica Small. So the recommendation is that West Elgin Council hereby acknowledge receipt of the letter from the West Lorne Minor Hockey Association executive, and that council approve the appointment of Jessica Small as the West Lorne Minor Hockey Association representative to the Bo Horvat Community Center Board of Management.
Okay, any questions on that one? No? A mover, please. Councillor Statham. Just move. Councillor Denning, the second. All in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Okay, 12.3, Natterjack Brewing Company.
This is more of a housekeeping item, that it's a requirement under the Alcohol Gaming and Commission of Ontario, is that Natterjack provides a liquor license notification to the municipality, as they are going to be supplying craft beers and cider and some other items for the Roots and Revival Festival. So this is just acknowledging receipt of that.
I just have one question on that. Is that going to be served in a public place?
Can speak to that through the chair.
Please.
Yes, so there's going to be a road closure on Furnival Road. Will be served in a public place. My understanding is that there will be fencing installed, and it'll be done in accordance with the Alcohol and Gaming Commission.
Okay, thank you. That's all I need to know.
Thank you.
Anyone else got anything to say? Okay, can I have your recommendation, please?
The recommendation is that West Elgin Council hereby acknowledge receipt of the liquor license notification from Natterjack Brewing Company for the Roots and Revival Festival, October 4th and 5th, and October 11th to 12th, as information only.
Okay, mover, please. Councillor Statham, seconded. Deputy Mayor Tellier, all in favour? It's carried. Thank you. And we're going to move into a closed session.
The recommendation is that the Council of Municipality of West Elgin hereby proceeds into closed session at 5:44 PM to discuss matters pursuant to section 239(2)C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, and section 239(2)8)(2)E, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board.
Mover, please. Deputy Mayor Tellier, seconder. Councillor Statham, all in favour? It's carried. Okay. We're reporting from close.
Reporting from closed session at 7:22 PM. Council received 5 items pursuant to section 239(2) of the Municipal Act. Council provided administrative direction, including the following recommendation. That West Elgin Council hereby receives the report from Embadura, CAO Treasurer, regarding sale of land for information, and that West Elgin Council approves the recommendation of selling the property located at 282 Furnival Road, legally described as part of Lot 11, Plan 202, designated as Parts 4 and 5, 11R2724 for the amount of $14,000, and that West Elgin Council approves the recommendation of selling the property located at 0 Center Street, legally described as part of Lot 11, Plan 202, designated as Part 2, 11R779, except Part 1, 11R2105, Parts 3, 4, and 5, 11R2724, Municipality of West Elgin, in the amount of $112,000.
Move it, please. Councillor Statham, seconded. Councillor Denning, all in favour? That's carried. Go to 15, confirming bylaw.
That bylaw 2024-69, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the regular meeting of council held on September 26, 2024, be read a first, second, third, and final time.
Move it, please. Councillor Denning, seconded. Oh, sorry, Councillor Statham. And seconded by Deputy Mayor Tellier. All in favour? Carried. And adjournment.
That the Council of the Municipality of West Elgin hereby adjourn at 7:24 PM to meet again at 5:00 PM on October 10th, 2024, or at the call of the chair.
Move it, please. Deputy Mayor Tellier. Seconded, Councillor Statham. All in favour? It's carried. Thank you.